settle its report in the House with recommendations either approving or rejecting the nominees. In conclusion, the Committee of Employment shall guided by the Constitution, guided by the Constitution, relevant laws, the Act and all other relevant laws. I thank you. We'll now invite the Sergeant to administer the oath to the Honorable Professor Kithure Kindiki. You can take the oath with the Bible, the Quran, or affirm, as the case may be. Yes, Owen?
I'm wondering whether that is on record, because I don't know whether the mic was on or not.
Was the mic on?
So probably we need to redo the
I thought it was on, but for avoidance of doubt, Professor, you may repeat the oath.
I, Kithure Kindiki, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matter under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Welcome to the Committee of Parliament, Professor. This is the second time this committee is having an opportunity to have a bite at you in terms of vetting and assessing your suitability to hold the office to which you have been nominated. Before we start, we'll do some quick introduction of the team or the committee that's going to interrogate you. On my right is the Deputy Speaker of the House, Honorable Gladys Boss. On my left is the Clerk of the National
Kosik David.
Kikari David.
Masemeri
Abdul Rahim Daoud.
Ferdinand Kevin Wanyonyi. George Gitonga Murugara.
Owen Bayer.
Robert Mbui.
Stephen Mule.
Dido Raso. Abdi Shurie.
Bishimboko Likoni.
Rehab Mukami Washira.
Mangala Mrs. Saboti.
We also have the Secretariat that is supporting this process, led by the Deputy Clerk, Sarah Kyoko, and all those good people sitting behind, who will be giving us some behind the curtain support. Professor Kindiki, welcome. We'll start by asking you the obvious questions to introduce yourself briefly, stating your name, family background, education background, work and employment experience, your present engagement, your status of compliance with all the relevant agencies of government that we passed on to you. You have 5 minutes for this exercise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this committee. The Speaker My name is Kithure Kindiki. I am 52 years old. I was born in Kindiki and grew up there. Went to primary school there, and upon my completion of secondary education, I studied law. I have a Bachelor of Laws degree from the university which I obtained in 1998. I have a Master of Law from the University of Victoria, and I have a PhD in International Law from the University of Victoria, which I obtained in 2002. I am married, I have 3 children, and I have worked in the last 25, 26 years in various capacities. I'm an advocate in the High Court of Kenya, have 24 years standing. And in the process of my career, Honorable Speaker, I have worked as a lecturer. I rose from the position of assistant lecturer. I became associate dean of the faculty of law at the University of Nairobi. I became associate dean. I was head of the department of public law. In between, I was head of the department of public law. I am licensed to practice law in Kenya, but licensed for international law in Kenya, courts and tribunals before the International Criminal Court, courts and tribunals where International Criminal Court remain in the list of where Defense Counsel remain in the list. Mr. Speaker, sir, Defense Counsel. I've been consulted, Speaker, sir, many organizations. I've been consulted agencies, many organizations, including regional organizations like IGAD, regional organization, and Union East African Community, like IGAD, COMESA Africa, and also East African Community. I am a member, and also a number of professional organizations of a number of, including the Academic Council of the United Nations system, including the Academic Council of the United Nations Forced Migration, the International Association on the Study of Forced Migration, of Jurists, National Court, East African Law Society of Jurists, and the East African Law Society of Kenya. And I submit. Law Society of Kenya. I submit.
Thank you. Status of compliance.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have filed to Parliament through the clerk my compliance with the Higher Education Loans Board, my compliance with the Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of tax compliance. I also have filed my compliance with all the other statutory bodies, including EACC, as well as the clearance from a recognized credit bureau, as was guided. And therefore, I want to submit, Mr. Speaker, that I've complied with all the statutory requirements as was guided by this House.
And you have all the documents?
Yes, I do.
You'll pass them on to that sergeant next to you to give to Sarah Kyoko to have a look at.
Does that include the certificates?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right.
She'll compare with the copies that you sent to Parliament. I will now open the session for asking and interrogating the nominee. And I'll give the first shot to the Deputy Speaker.
Professor Kindiki, I know this is within your knowledge, that the Maraga Task Force on Police Reforms identified many challenges in the National Police Service, the Kenya Prison Service, and the National Youth Service as underfunding, endemic corruption, poor handling of human capital and development. So could you highlight for us some of the police reforms that you undertook during your just ended tenure as Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Internal, National Administration? And also, if approved, what are some of the measures that you will put in place to implement some of those recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I forgot to say between 2022 and 11th July 2024, I was the Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Administration. Mr. Speaker, in response to the question by the Deputy Speaker, I respond as follows. That the task force that was established to response to the question by the Deputy Speaker, I respond as follows. That the task force that was established to recommend legal, policy, institutional, and other reforms in the National Police Service and the Kenya Prison Service made far-reaching recommendations on a number of issues, including welfare issues, leadership and accountability issues, career progression and succession management in the National Police Service, and also operational capabilities, equipment, and so forth. Mr. Speaker, sir, that task force recommended 221 recommendations that require administrative action. It also recommended a further 178 recommendations which require funding but do not require any changes in law or policy. The task force recommended another 177 recommendations, which may not require funding, but require legislative and policy changes. And finally, the task force recommended 23 recommendations in connection with the National Police Service, not the Kenya Prison Service. 23 of them that require consultations and concurrence with the National Security Council. We have, in the period when I have been the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, we have been able to take action on some of the recommendations that did not require legal or policy changes. For example, we've rolled out a massive police equipment modernization program, which will be rolled out in 5 years. And already, under my leadership, we were able to convince the government and the National Treasury to allocate 7 billion shillings, which has already been spent to buy air and land assets to assist officers who have been exposed to great danger, those that are helping to keep the country safe in the front line, in the fight against terror, the fight against banditry and other sophisticated organized crimes. And therefore, this equipment is already up and running, especially mine resistance, ambush protected vehicles, armored personnel carriers, personal protection equipment, and also aerial unmanned vehicles, which are commonly known as drones. And we've been able to restore the police air wing, which had collapsed. And we have some of the aircrafts which are now operational and helping us with air surveillance. And we have also, hoping in the
in the next financial year, if I am approved by this House, we'll be able to purchase additional gunship helicopters to help us finish the remaining work in terms of the fight against terror, the fight against banditry and other organized crimes. Mr. Speaker, I also need to point out that because of the grave issues around leadership and succession management and career progression in the National Police Service, during my 21 months as the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, we've been able to put in place, operationalize the National Police Leadership Academy, which we opened, operationalize the National Police Leadership Academy, which we opened, His Excellency the President opened in Gong. And this is the academy that is helping us put together a curriculum that will help us put in place short courses, professional courses to retool, reskill our police officers, especially those that are in leadership, and also provide a fast-track process of identifying, nurturing leadership among our police officers. And therefore, going forward, with the academy now operational, we believe that in the next few years, we're going to inculcate not only fast succession management and career progression program, but also we're going to have a very motivated leadership within our police officers. We have also, of course, taken action around welfare issues. Already the increments for the first increments that were proposed by the task force have already been put in place. We have also, in terms of giving motivation to our officers, also operationalized the National Police Service Hospital, which is supposed to take care of those who are injured in the front line so that they are not exposed to health or even subsequent risks when they visit ordinary hospitals. So by and large, that's what we've done. And finally, on the proposals that require legislative reforms and policy reforms, we have formulated about 6 pieces of legislation which are ready. They are just waiting for stakeholder participation, and then they'll be conveyed to Parliament through Cabinet. And if I can highlight this as I end that response, Mr. Speaker, they include, number 1, the National Police Service Amendment Bill 2024, the National Police Service Commission Amendment Bill 2024, the National Forensic Laboratory Services Bill 2024. We have also formulated a bill which will also assist us in the leadership and the command oversight in the National Police Service. I submit.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question to the CS nominee relates to just where he stopped on the legal and legislative proposals that he was considering before his exit from the ministry, and more so around the issue of implementation of Article 37 of the Constitution on the right of Kenyans to picket, assemble, demonstrate peaceably. And CS, you have seen in the recent past a lot of confrontations between members of the public and the police. And it's my view that principally why this has been so is because you have failed to designate picketing corners. And Kenyans imagine you can picket anywhere and everywhere, including in some areas that you consider restricted areas. I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do if you are reappointed and approved by this committee to ensure that there are no more confrontations between members of the public who want to peaceably assemble and picket and the police. Two, there seems to have been a complete breakdown in administrative and security structures in the country. And I say that in view of when you came into office, the Shakahola massacre, where up to now we don't know how many Kenyans lost their lives in Shakahola. We have seen in the recent past Kware here in Nairobi. In a country like ours, how is it possible where you have chiefs, assistant chiefs, nyumba kumi, and all the structures and security and administrative structures that we have, that 20, 40 people can be killed around one small area like Kware in the full view of the security and administrative structures without government coming to know. And the same thing happened to Shakahola. And I would want to hear what is it that you would intend to do to make sure that there is restoration of administrative and security structures right at the village level to secure our country.
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is true there is work that requires to be done to ensure that the people of Kenya enjoy their constitutional right and freedom to assemble, picket, and demonstrate, and present petitions to public authorities, while at the same time maintaining public order and also ensuring the rights of other people. Before I was dismissed on 11th of July, I had actually finalized the draft regulations to the Public Order Act, which will be the statutory instrument to be processed for purposes of giving effect to the enjoyment of that right, not to curtail that right, because a statute cannot curtail a constitutional right, but to give effect to how that right will be exercised. Those draft regulations, when completed, will be able to help the police do a number of things. Number one, obligate the police to escort protesters and provide security for them, but also to ensure protesters don't run amok and overrun members of the public who are not protesting. Number three, it will require those protesting to notify the police and tell and also give the number of protesters so that the appropriate arrangements are made. It will also obligate public institutions in all arms of government, all public institutions, to designate an area within their premises or within the vicinity of their premises where a group of protesters who want to present petitions can stand, demonstrate, and present petitions to that public office or that public institution. Those regulations also will of course ask protesters to also be responsible for their own conduct, and therefore we hope that if I am approved, this is a low-hanging matter. It's something that we can process in the shortest time possible to avoid a situation like what we've had in the past 1 month of protests which are unmanaged and which have exposed us to deaths and destruction of property and a lot of inconvenience to the people of Kenya. On the second question by the leader of the majority party, it is true that we have experienced a number of security incidents that should not have happened in the first place. And let me say that first and foremost, the Shakahola incident didn't happen when it became public. It happened over quite a number of years,
And it's an indictment actually on our ability as a country to be able to prevent some of these sophisticated crimes from hurting our people. I am on record to having apologized on behalf of previous and the present administration for that breach, because the radicalization and the criminal activity around Shakahola began in 2019-2020. But the manifestation in terms of people dying and being buried was something that happened sometimes in 2022. And the Shakahola incidents will remain the most tragic security breach in the history of our country. We have never had a security breach of that magnitude in our country. We have learned the lessons. 2 days ago, the task force that the president had appointed has helped to give us some of the recommendations on what we need to do to avoid that going forward. But also, we believe that the public officials, including security officers who are in charge, must also have their day in being made accountable. We had proposed the establishment of a commission of inquiry to help us put together the accountability process so that we can have recommendations on prosecution and other action. But the commission of inquiry was stopped by our courts, and we were unable to move. But with or without the commission of inquiry, I want to assure the people of Kenya, if I am approved, one of my priorities will be to make sure that the accountability for the crimes in Shakahola by public officials, including security managers of all arms, of all agencies of the state, must proceed as a way of making sure that we do not have this kind of thing happening again. It is true also recently we had an incident which is actively under investigations around Kware area. Again, the same reasons, gaps in the Ngao and Nyumba Kumi structures, and also our intelligence collection ability. And I just want to say that now that we have finalized the proposals and we know what we need to do to reform our National Police Service, my next assignment, if I am approved by this House, will be to initiate far-reaching reforms in the national government administration system to ensure that we restructure the Ngao system, make it more responsive, modernize it, and distribute it to the lowest level in a manner which helps us to avoid incidents like this when we have serious security breaches, yet we have government officials paid by the people of
Let your image turn louder. Let your image turn. Let your image turn. We announce the power of God has overtaken the month of August. We announce the glory of God has overtaken the month of August. We announce the strength of God has overtaken the month of August. We announce the glory of God has overtaken the month of August. Right now, August is not ordinary. August is not ordinary. August is not ordinary. August is not ordinary. The heavens are open. The heavens are open over August. Even right now. Even right now. Even right now. Restoration, revival, renewal in August. Right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. Let your image turn louder. Let your image.
All these abuses that have happened, in spite of all the problems that Kenyans have encountered, what is this new idea that you will employ this time if approved by this House? Because one of the things we are looking at, Professor, Chairman, is the suitability of the person to hold that office. What makes you think you are suitable in spite of all those problems that you have encountered the last 2 months? Thank you, Chair.
Professor, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I was in office for 21 months, 623 days. I can account for each and every day of my stay in office. I woke up every day, and my focus has been to ensure that our country is safe. I have risen before dawn, every day including Sundays, and gone to sleep very late, simply because of the demands of our homeland security. I believe that I am suitable for reappointment because during those 21 months, during those 623 days, I have been able to keep the country fairly safe, especially in the fight against terror. Previously, we had an escalation around 2021-2022 of terror attacks in northern Kenya and the Boni Enclave. And in the past 2 years, approximately, we've had stability in northern Kenya and Lamu. I believe I am suitable, Honorable Speaker, because the crime of banditry has been reduced significantly, in my estimation, by more than 75%, even if pockets of insecurity continue to be experienced. And we do know where the gaps are and what needs to be done to even bring this problem to a complete end. Mr. Speaker, I have visited all the 47 counties, some of the counties numerous times. I've been to Lamu 21 times in 21 months. I've been to Samburu 8 times. I've been to Baringo 13 times. I've been to many other counties. And therefore, I have not been lazy. I've been diligent. And I've conducted myself within the parameters of Article 73, which requires me to conduct myself in a manner that brings honor to the nation and dignity to the office I hold. I have worked with officers at the headquarters, but I've also sat down in numerous meetings to work with officers at regional, county, and sub-county levels to make sure that we share decision-making processes and decision implementation processes. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the question has been directed to the events of the recent weeks. And I want to respond as follows.
Now, the reason that I didn't talk every day is because the events the honorable member is referring to were mainly operational issues. The work of the minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, as envisaged in Article 245 of the Constitution, is to give the organs of national security that fall under that ministry policy direction and policy guidance, and in particular because we are talking about the police. Mr. Speaker, the police is under independent command, Article 245, paragraph 2. There are only two people who can give the Inspector General of Police directives. First, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, but only on policy issues. Number two, the the Director of Public Prosecutions in matters in investigations of criminal activities. Other than that, operational matters are handled by the command of the National Police Service, and therefore the minister doesn't give operational directives. We have communicated the policy during my time in office, the policy of the Kenya Kwanza administration on policing, which includes zero tolerance on extrajudicial killings, zero tolerance on abuse of human rights, and restraints in the use of force. Limited only, the use of force being limited only to cases contemplated in the Constitution and the National Police Service Act and the schedule thereto in the defense of life of the officer or the life of the people of Kenya. Therefore, it is unfortunate that during a recent protest, we witnessed the death of 42 Kenyans. We also had injuries, 486 civilians and 385 police officers were injured. We had about 1,387 arrests. We had 54 police cars destroyed and 110 motor vehicles belonging to the people of Kenya also destroyed in those protests. And therefore, I want to submit as follows: that the operational responsibility of policing lies with the command of the National Police Service. It is my estimation that on a broader scale of things, generally, the police tried their best to protect the country against mobs of criminals, arsonists, and other dangerous people, including those who visited Parliament and wanted to kill parliamentarians and other people. The police did their best. And in the event, as it is possible, that any officer went beyond what is allowed in terms of the use of force, it is now the work of the Independent Police Oversight Authority and other accountability agencies to help the country to bring to closure the issue of justice for excess use of force. I want to submit as follows, Mr. Speaker, that even beyond the police having independent operational command, the issue of the use of firearms by a police officer is individual. If you read the National Police Service Act and the Schedule 6 to that Act, every police officer has individual responsibility on how they use firearms. You cannot, the Inspector General of Police will not be there to tell the police, the officer, shoot this one, don't shoot this one. There will be an operational order that will generally guide the police officer. So the accountability of the IG will be on the operational order, which is publicly available, whether that operational order met the constitutional threshold, but the use of force by individual officers is an individual responsibility issue. Other than that, I commend generally those officers who tried their best in very difficult circumstances to help the country come to terms with what happened, and hope and will see to it, if I am reappointed, that the accountability for those who violated the law is pursued conclusively. I submit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question will just require yes or no. So then I'll be able to ask the next one. So Professor Kindiki, are you aware that for the last 2 years we have internally displaced persons in parts of the North Rift, that is Samburu County, parts of Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, and other parts of the North Rift? It's a yes or no?
Yes.
So if this committee finds you suitable to hold this office again, what measures will you put in place? So if this committee finds you suitable to hold this office again, what measures will you put in place to see that these families go back to their homes, and especially going children will go back to school and people can go back to their homes and live peacefully? Mr. Speaker, allow me to ask the last question, which is also, are you aware that there are people in the North Rift who were killed in broad daylight, in marketplaces, in towns, for example, in Samburu West, in Suguta town? There have been abductions, and this current administration, which you served in, during its campaigns and has continuously said that you will not have issues of abductions, issues of extrajudicial killings, but I want to put it across to you that it has been happening. There are people in those counties who are missing to date. They have been abducted. I want to ask you whether you're aware, and we have sufficiently been informed that it is alleged that it is security officers who have abducted these people. Is that one of your measures of ensuring insecurity is settled in these areas? And do you think, as a professor of constitutionalism and ensuring we follow the Constitution, is that the right way in ensuring fair justice even to those who are accused?
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, now that the kinetic operations that we launched in February 2023 has yielded significant fruits, the issue of the North Rift will not be complete until those that were displaced because of the violence meted upon them by bandits, groups and gangs are returned to their homes. And therefore, it is going to be my priority, if I am approved by this House, to make sure that in line with the rights of every Kenyan under the Constitution and the relevant instruments, including international instruments on the prevention of internal displacement, we're going to resettle, facilitate the resettlement and reintegration of all communities that were displaced by the menace of banditry. Secondly, I've been asked to respond to the allegations about abduction. During my tenure as minister, I made it clearly, I made it clear to the police that abductions, extrajudicial killings, and extra-constitutional means of apprehending offenders is against government policy, is against the Constitution, is against international law. I must hasten to say my observation, because I've been in the front line more than any other place, especially in North Rift, in northern Kenya, and the Boni Enclave. The officers who served in the special units in counter-terrorism and counter-banditry, the formed-up units have been quite professional, generally. But just as I've said in the previous question, in the event there are any infractions, there are any reported infractions and excesses by the special forces that are helping us to fight banditry, again, IPOA and other accountability mechanisms must be put in place to ensure that we do not spoil the very good work that is being done by our officers in the front line. Some of them have died, others have lost limb, officers have been destituted.
Point of order, Chairman, I was saying that you know, the nominee is a professor, and professors teach in the university, so he can answer questions like somebody who's in class teaching us. I was requesting through the chairman that he can do faster. Chair.
Professor, be concise and precise and to the point.
I submit.
Thank you. Nelson, we'll just come around. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Professor Kindiki, it's unprecedented that twice in 2 years we've had to apply Section 241 of our Constitution in deploying our officers, our military officers, to back up the police, both to quell the protest and initially sent to the North Rift. What exactly is the state of our police force? There are so many things that are flying around, gossip, that number one, our officers, police officers could be demoralized. Number two, is there a situation that you feel the police at some point are very hesitant to execute some of the assignments they're given because of lack of morale? And you as a CS, the accusations that you've not helped in boosting the morale of our police officers. What exactly is the state of our police force?
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, yes, we have applied Article 241 twice. And I think there is nothing abnormal with that, Mr. Speaker, because that is why that article exists. So that whenever there is need, the National Police Service may request the support of the Kenya Defence Forces to handle either an emergency or a disastrous situation. On the case of the North Rift, it was important to get the support of the KDF because at that time the National Police Air Wing had collapsed. Right now it's operational. We didn't have air assets, we didn't have adequate long-range unmanned aerial vehicles, and therefore we needed the support of the military. But the effort in North Rift is police-led. In fact, the military has been supportive in the peripheries, police-led. Even in terms of numbers, we have 4,500 police officers against less than 1,000 KDF officers. With regard to the recent emergency we had, again, what we had on 25th of June was unprecedented. And our calling of the KDF was simply to put them on standby should they be needed. And you've seen they have not been needed. But it was a precaution because the criminals who wanted to burn Parliament were also threatening to burn State House and other critical installations. So if that was not reason enough to put KDF on standby legally, I don't think any other situation would have met threshold, because what we faced in the last month, in our view, was existential threat, not just to the arms of government, but to the state itself. And therefore, the police is in good shape. There are issues of welfare, which we are handling. I've already mentioned about the salary increments, which we have started implementing. There's issues around housing. There are also issues about the leave and so forth and so on. Medication, I've just talked about the hospital that we've established for them, fully fledged level 4 hospital. We have one for the border police again, which again we operationalized under my leadership in Kanyonyo for the formed up units. So yes, there is more to be done, but it is not true to say that the police force is demoralized. They have done a good job, and when it's necessary, we have called in the KDF in accordance with the law when we feel that the situation is an emergency. I submit.
Posing.
I thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Professor, and Honorable Chairman, I want to rely on section, I'm on this side, Professor. I want to rely on Section 6 and Section 7 of the Act in terms of suitability of the candidate the position he has been nominated. And in this respect, Honorable Speaker, I want to take the Minister in terms of suitability on his credibility in terms of respecting what he says, in terms of implementing what he says. Because this is the second time he's been given a chance. And Speaker, I want also the nominee to know that absence of war is not necessarily peace. Whatever is happening in the North Rift, Honorable Speaker, there is relative peace. There's no war, but it might not necessarily mean peace. What am I saying, Honorable Speaker? The candidate, as an example, the candidate came to the North Rift. We had engagement as leaders of the North Rift, and specifically West Pokot County, as an example of the entire country. I don't know what happened, so what the minister did in the other places, but possibly maybe he did what he did in West Pokot, which is we agreed on a number of issues, Honorable Speaker, in terms of strategies of bringing peace, including establishment of sub-locations or bringing even the security near to the people so that we avoid the Shakahola things and so on. And the minister agreed with the Honorable Speaker with us in West Pokot. And we also agreed to put security in strategic areas. It might happen in other parts of the country. The minister agreed. And Speaker, nothing happened. Nothing has happened so far. Now, if Parliament sees it fit and approves the minister again for this position, what's going to happen? What is the minister going to do different, Honorable Speaker, to gain credibility among people, among Kenyans themselves, who might feel that the minister lied to them? And finally, Speaker, take home for the minister. This idea of giving police accounting as an accounting or to manage their own money as an accounting officer, I want the minister to take home in terms of the security, the strategic security of this country. What does that mean in terms of security of this country? Going into the future, there are critics, Honorable Speaker, that say, how do you give the police the gun and you also give them the money? What's going to happen? It might pose a serious security in this country going forward, maybe many years in the future. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is true that...
Those are just two simple questions. Did you honor what you did and said in Pokot? And is the police fund tenable? Very simple.
Mr. Speaker, it is true that some of the things that I promised have not been realized, especially the issue of operationalization of new administrative units. But it is also true that some of the things I promised have been realized, and I thought the honorable member would be kind enough to notify the House and the country that during the same consultations I had promised that we will provide, train and equip 200 National Police Reservists for West Pokot, which we did. Number 2, we had promised to set up a security camp at a place formerly called Lami Nyeusi, which is now called Lami Nyeupe, which we did, and so many other things we did. But the issue of the units is outstanding, and not just for West Pokot, but also for a few other counties, including some parts of Baringo, Samburu, and a few other counties that did not benefit from the operationalization of units, and that is work that we are going to complete if we are reappointed. On the second question, I do not think there is a problem with giving the National Police Service money and control over resources relating to their operations. The operational budgets of the police must be run by the National Police Service themselves, and not by the ministry, not by the Office of the President. And in my view, if there are issues of lack of effectiveness, it is not because the police have their own budget. If anything, it should help them even work more efficiently. Therefore, the question should be, now that the police have their operational budget, what prevents them from serving the people of Kenya in a better manner? And those are issues that we'll be looking at if we are reappointed.
In any case, Parliament oversights the use of that money. Gikaria?
Thank you, Chair. Professor Kindiki, in the recent past in this demonstration, 2 young men, Michael Kihunga Nyagodie and another young man called Kevin Maganga, were shot dead in Nakuru. The family has been trying to get some information from IPOA. It is alleged that the IPOA is not receiving required information from the police service. This has posed a great challenge to IPOA executing its oversight mandate. If approved for this appointment, Honorable Kindiki, what steps will you take to ensure that the two institutions work seamlessly for the benefit of Kenyans? And secondly, how will you strengthen IPOA so as to execute its mandate? Second, the Honorable Chair, is about urban criminal gang activities. In the urban areas, particularly in Nakuru, a criminal gang called Confirm, which by what the citizens claim has brought about 5 deaths in every month and hundreds of injuries. Maybe if you're approved and confirmed, what are the steps that you'll take to reduce the increase of criminal activities in urban areas, and particularly in Nakuru, specifically the confirmed criminal gang? Thank you, Chair.
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, on the first issue, the relationship between IPOA and the National Police Service is an ongoing conversation, and it's not unusual. It happens all over the world that the police and the bodies oversight them have normal institutional tensions. We have, during our tenure in office, we have encouraged these institutions to work together because each one of them is playing an important role. It is the same problem we had between the police service and the Police Service Commission, and we did a lot of work and around that, and were able to get a win-win situation where the Commission and the police service are working together. So we'll apply the same methods if we are reappointed to make sure that IPOA gets the support it requires from the NPS, and going forward we will support IPOA in terms of more resources, more capacity, but also just brokering the institutional goodwill between themselves and the police. The second question Mr. Speaker, is on the criminal gangs. It is true. We have had a gang in Nakuru known as Confirm, and urban crime is a major issue. When I took over as CS for Interior, October 2022, there was a lot of gang violence and gang crime in Nairobi. We've been able to reduce and suppress the Nairobi urban criminal activity significantly. We hope that the Nakuru matter could also be resolved. And before I was dismissed from office, I had a meeting with the leaders of Nakuru County, and we had agreed that according to the feedback the leaders gave us, we needed to change the command, because sometimes many of these performance issues are based on the right command. So we are going to work on it to ensure that we eliminate that gang and other urban gangs in Mombasa and a few other towns that are suffering the same problem.
Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Professor, Kenya's constitution borrows very heavily from the US one, particularly issues to do with the Bill of Rights. And you swore to uphold this constitution and protect it. Recently, you saw in the US that a gunman tried to shoot a presidential nominee and was actually brought down, but despite that, and even missed, but despite that, the head of Secret Service resigned their post. Now in Kenya, during your tenure as CS, over 100 Kenyans have been killed, murdered by the police. You know that maybe over 1,000 people have been injured, and property worth billions of shillings has been destroyed. Not to forget that a lot of Kenyans have also been abducted, and as we are talking, there are still people, families that are still looking for their loved ones. Now, we did see that the Inspector General of Police resigned. Do you think that as a CS, you should not also have taken responsibility, political responsibility for that failure that the resignation confirms, and also either resigned or declined the appointment? It's also important to note that during these demos that were held, a lot of people were shot. And there is clamor and request and, for justice. In fact, I've attended, one of them was a constituent, Erickson Mutisia, and we've gone to those funerals, and the families are asking for justice. You have forensic evidence because you have the bullets, and you know that every bullet that comes from a gun can be traced. Why have we not seen arrests and arraignment in court of the police officers that are accused or that were involved in these shootings? Because that would appease the public a little bit. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to also point out that the CS has had, the nominee has had a very illustrious career. And, PhD, you've done consultancy all over. And when you are here for the approval hearings in 2022, after all those many years of working, your wealth was at 544 million. Now, 2 years later, your wealth now is at 694 million. That is a whopping 150 million shillings more. Maybe you could explain to us, is this increase probably related to the office that you hold? It would be important for us to know. And finally, Mr. Speaker.
Too many questions, Robert.
Mr. Speaker, just one last one, because we are doing very well with time, Mr. Speaker. Just one last one, which is because I'm just picking out some of the things that some of the members have said on the matters of insecurity and criminal gangs, Mr. Speaker, that have been out there mugging our people. There's burglaries, in the North Rift, there are all these issues of cattle rustling and all that, which you have admitted there are issues. Now, my question is, when you know that we have such insecurity in the country, what was the logic behind making a decision to send 1,000 police officers to go and secure Haiti when Kenya has a problem? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Professor.
Mr. Speaker, those are three questions. The first one, the Honorable Boy asked about whether I should have resigned. The example the member gave about US, where the candidate for presidency was nearly killed, raises a number of issues. One, he says the person who attempted that was killed. That demonstrates use of force, even in our local context, is allowed, because nobody raised issues with that criminal who was wanted to kill Donald Trump. He was shot dead without questions. Number two, the honorable member said that the director of the Secret Service resigned, but also drew a parallel and said our IG also resigned. The minister did not resign in the US. I don't know why the Kenyan minister must resign. And nobody asked the minister to resign, because ministers don't instruct operations, they instruct policy. I can only resign if my policy instruction is unconstitutional or illegal. Then on the question of those unfortunate incidents when Kenyans lost their lives and the quest for justice, I strongly believe that there must be justice, and every death that occurred must be accounted for. However, Mr. Speaker, the process of putting together criminal investigations, including forensic evidence, is not something that can be done, can be rushed. It takes a bit of time all over the world, not just in Kenya. I believe IPOA should help the country to get closure, and I have promised, if I am reappointed, I'll encourage the collaboration and support and goodwill between IPOA and the police in terms of providing information so that justice is served. I have also been asked about my wealth, which has increased from 544 million to 694 million. It is true because, first, let me start by saying that I have not benefited from any improper business. I have not done any business with government. Let's start from there. I have not applied for any tender by myself, by proxy, by relative, or by anybody. Mr. Speaker, before I was appointed, my wealth was at 544 million. I said at that time, which I still do now, that I have run a business, which today I do not participate in that business. I don't practice law, but my law firm is alive and working, and much of that revenue has actually come through the revenue from my law firm, which is still active but being managed by other people. I think all my salary and allowances have been spent in paying bills. Therefore, most of the increment in my net worth is because of three things. One, the legal fees, some of which was actually pending by the time I was being appointed, and I said it here, that there are some unpaid legal fees, which some of them were paid. In fact, I remember 2 months after I was appointed, one of the clients paid a significant amount of legal fees, which had been pending. Other than that, I do small businesses and so forth and so on. None of my money has come from the public except the salary and the allowances that I'm entitled to. Lastly, on Haiti, it is true that the government of Kenya, through the National Security Council, decided to deploy our officers in Haiti pursuant to a request by the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. These are international obligations. It has not affected our operations, and it is not true to say that since there are problems in Kenya, we cannot also do our international obligations, because all countries in the world do have security issues. They have security matters. Even the country you consider safest has its own security matters. And therefore, it is a great honor for our officers to serve in Haiti. So far, they are doing a good job. I believe they will profile Kenya properly. They will bring honor to our country. And that deployment has not affected our operational capabilities. I submit.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you.
Don't be like your neighbor. Ask one question.
I'll ask only one question, Mr. Speaker. Professor Kithure Kindiki, in your first stint as CS Interior, you are associated with strong statements, such as "we will crush you," you'll be met with the full force of the law, "we will deal with you firmly and deadly," and many other words like that. Statements which seem to fuel police extrajudicial action. And Kenyans have taken notice of such statements that probably they fuel police extrajudicial action. And the use of excessive force, because if you tell people we'll crush you, the police will crush you. That's what it will entail. As you see now, there's a new awakening in this country about what public officers are saying. How different will you be if we approve you? Secondly, you are also the civilian face among the police and the security organs that we have. But as you took up this job, probably, Professor Kindiki, you became more of them, more of a police officer, not a civilian within. You are donning police uniform, you are all over police choppers, and you behaved like a police officer, which probably took you away from the police direction that you're supposed to give the forces, and became more of an operational leader instead of a policy director in the force. How will you be different on this? And probably lastly, you are more in the sky than on earth. When you want to give policy direction, you want to give guiding, you need to be in office, have meetings, boardrooms, and give policy direction. But you have said you actually went to Lamu 21 days, 21 times in 21 months. And probably in the operation field more than where you are required to give operational or to give policy guidance and direction. And that's why the police force and the administration, national government administration, is not properly coordinated. How different will you be when we approve you as CS? I thank you.
Professor?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I've been asked to say whether I'll change my language. Mr. Speaker, I need to clarify that it is true I have used very, very unique language. But, Mr. Speaker, this is security language. And the people I address when I use those terminologies are not the law-abiding citizens of Kenya. The people I address with that difficult terminology or unique terminology are terrorists, bandits, organized criminals. Those are the people I tell will crush you, and I mean it. Last time I appeared before here, the member for Samburu West asked me what I will do in Kurkur and other places when criminals descend into gorges, and I'll say I'll flatten the gorges. We've done a bit of that. There were places in Baringo, Corcoran Hills, a place called Tandare, a place called Ngelecha, and in Samburu, the Malaso Valley and other places where criminals would always retreat and have a field day, operate from there. We've neutralized them and removed them from there. So, again, the use of force is permitted by law, depending on who that force is used against and in what circumstances.
and the escalation methods are used. You start by asking them to surrender. If they don't, you use other methods until, if they challenge you or they want to kill police officers, the police officers will kill them before they kill the officer. That is the law. Mr. Speaker, on the second issue, I have been there at headquarters driving policy in boardrooms, Arambe House. I've had so many meetings in our campuses in Kiganjo, in Embakasi, Roiro, Police Leadership Academy. But I've also been in the field more. Why? To disseminate policy to our forward operating bases, to our camps, to our officers in the field, in the counties. And even in the counties, before I even start my meetings, I would sit with the county security committee in a boardroom, disseminate the policy, because they are the ones who will be left to implement. And I have also been in the most dangerous spots in our territory with our officers in the front line. Why? To give them moral support, that we have not posted them there to die. We have posted them there to protect the country. And there is no greater morale booster than for the security minister to go and visit the officers, have lunch with them, encourage them, and tell them what the government policy is and what the government thinks about them. So it has been very rewarding. I will be back in the normal manner, but I will of course balance between my headquarters work and also the field work. Lastly, I've been asked to land. I have always landed. For every flight, I have landed. And finally, on the issue of uniform, what I wear is tactical attire, because there are some things which protective clothing that you need tactical wear to be able to have protective clothing and protective facilities, because you're in a dangerous situation. I don't wear that on the streets of Nairobi. And also I have been in not just police helicopters, but military helicopters, because the law provides that the security minister be facilitated when he is in dangerous situations. The Minister for Interior, the Minister for Defense must be facilitated, because the nature of our work is we are exposed to risk and danger by virtue of office. Otherwise, I do not fancy it's only that it's all in a day's job.
Murugara. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. CS nominee, let me take you away from the police officers, the bandits, and all these other insecurity matters you're dealing with, back to national government administration. I recollect very well that when you were here, we actually questioned you on it lastly during the vetting, and emphasized that the nerve center of the national government administration is in the villages. That we do have very serious workers in the villages who possibly are not recognized by the national government, but who play a key role in the service and security provision and everything else, so that we can avert incidents like the Shakahola and the quarry incidents we've talked about. Here I'm talking about the village elders and the Nyumba Kumi workers, whom you use extensively, 24 hours every day, every month, and every year, and in a form of service which is very similar to servitude or some form of modern day slavery. These people are not remunerated. Your response that time was that a policy was going to be put in place immediately, and that they would actually start getting a form of remuneration. The question I have to you is, how far has that gone, and when should these people expect their paycheck? Whether check, whether M-Pesa, whether whatever is going to be, when should they expect to be paid?
Mr. Speaker, sir, we finalized the Village Elders Bill 2024. It is one of the 12 pieces of legislation that are awaiting cabinet approval for transmission to Parliament, and therefore that matter will be sorted out in the shortest time possible. I submit.
Waziri, I want you to again go back to Haiti, where we actually deployed almost 600 police officers. My fear now is that with what is happening around there, the fact one of my voters at home has one of his son actually deployed. And the question is, how secure? Do you have special security insurance for this particular, just in case something has happened? Of course, that has led to a deficit of police officers. That's why when you had demonstration here, you had to get in the army because we don't have enough police officers, so because some of them are away. Secondly, I also have had a case in North Rift. In fact, my colleague is just walking in. The North Rift, where you have this police reservists have been disarmed, and yet we have problems in North Rift. And those are my borders, and we have that problem. And yet you have actually disarmed the police reservists. What are you doing about that? Professor will take Daoud, note the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CS nominee, you have promised regarding passports a couple of times, and you know passports are the most important. You initially said within a day, within a week, within 2 weeks, but apparently the passport issue has not been sorted out. The other issue is regarding the IDs. Your department has rolled out that IDs will be 10 years, whereas we have known all along IDs did not